Joyride 1957, Chapter 28. That evening about midnight, James awoke from an aspirin sleep. His head still ached, but he had to move. He had scoured the papers in his suitcase and learned what he could, but it did little to jog his memory. From what he could ascertain, he was headed to Alexandria, Minnesota, when the tornado gave him a free flight over Kansas. It appeared that he was searching for some kind of treasure, and it had to do with ancient writing. There were two stones in his case, one with the runes OS and the other with an L or a V or something on it. Still, his memory was essentially blank. He decided he better get to Alexandria and try to regain at least some of his memory. Then maybe he would be able to figure out what he was searching for and why he ended up in the middle of nowhere, Durham, Kansas. He dressed in a dark polo, black jeans, and his navy jacket. He then opened his hospital room door just a crack. He saw no one was in the hall, so he walked out with his bag. He made it to the front door and walked out into the rather humid night. He spotted a 1957 Ford Fairlane with a retractable hardtop. It was black with gold chrome stripes down the side and black and white interior. The top was down. The key was not in the ignition. He surmised it had been the emergency room doctor's car. He slid in behind the wheel and reached under the dash. The car came to life. He eased out of the lot as quietly as the 312 cubic inch engine would. He located Highway 75 north and headed the Big Ford toward Omaha. He got as far as Nebraska City. The headaches were killing him, especially when the headlights of an oncoming car or truck loomed ahead of him. Finally, he pulled over at a little roadside rest, parked under a big elm tree, and lay down on the front seat. He felt a few raindrops sneaking through the elm leaves. He reached for the button on the dash, which raised the hardtop into position. He pushed it, and the top gradually raised up in two sections, after the trunk raised on its hinges located at the rear of the car. Finally, the top was in its up position, and the trunk lid lowered back down over the trunk. He then lay down on the seat, propped his head up on his jacket, and soon was snoring. Before he was fully asleep, he realized he had just stolen a car. He wasn't sure how or why he did so. Wondering what kind of guy he actually was, he slipped into REM. The sun woke him the next morning early. He filled the Ford retractable with ethyl at a Shell station in Nebraska City, crossed over into Iowa, caught Highway 59 at Shenandoah, then went up through Avoca, Denison, and Cherokee in Iowa, then on through Worthington, Montevideo, and Morris in Minnesota. He then crossed over to Glenwood and on into Alexandria. He looked for a motel and came upon the Lakes Motel. There was one room left, and he crawled into bed in room number 1 again past midnight, in a state of total exhaustion, to say nothing of the constant and unbearable headache. He was out like a light, and his dreams meandered back to a beach in northern Europe. We think he walked out of St. Francis Hospital in Topeka. He is no longer listed on the inpatient list. The staff won't give out any information, but his room number 232 is empty. I think he's pretty severely injured, but I wouldn't put it past him to have gotten up to you and Alec. Keep a watch out and maybe have one of your parishioners do a little search for him. The call was from Key West to the Church of St. Mary in Alexandria. The priest immediately made a call to his parishioner, and within an hour was back on the phone to Key West. We have no visual confirmation, but there is now a Ford with Kansas license plates at the Lakes Motor Hotel in front of room number 13. You want us to try and enter? No, just observe. If it's him, and it probably is, just monitor his activities and report periodically. Will do. He hung up the phone and went back to his prayers. Misty returned the night before from a wild weekend in Minneapolis. She awoke, dressed, ate, and went over to view the Kensington stone again. She was really in awe of such an ancient stone with such exquisite writing. How did men go from Europe a century before Columbus, land in Hudson's Bay, marched through this difficult mosquito-infested country all the way to this little town of Alexandria. Well, there was no town here then, or was there? Whatever. They trudged some 700 miles to where she was now standing. Misty was not only a plus-sized, beautiful woman, but also a very strong woman in good physical condition. She could walk 10 miles easily, but she doubted she could hike 700 miles over rough and very buggy terrain. There were native Indians, friendly or not, she wasn't sure. She stared at the stone with its runes, then she read the translation again. 8 Gotlanders, Swedes, and 22 Northmen, Norwegians, on this acquisition journey from Vinland, North America, far to the west. We had a camp by 2 shelters 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were fishing one day. After we came home, found 10 men red from blood and dead. Ave Maria, saved from evil. Then on the side of the stone she read the translation of the second message. There are 10 men by the inland sea to look after our ships 14 days' journey from the peninsula or island, year 1362. She'd done some reading on the subject and was aware of the proposed route that led out of Hudson's Bay, Ontario, Canada, at Port Nelson down the Nelson River to Lake Winnipeg, then up the Red River to where it ended in Wahpeton, North Dakota. From there it was about 70 miles southeast to Alexandria over rolling prairie. What were they doing here? Historians suggested that these Scandinavians were searching for the whereabouts of Leif Erikson's Greenland explorers, who landed and settled Greenland in about 1000 BC, some 300 years before this Kensington tour. Were they carrying or seeking treasure, gold or other precious metals? Did they leave some cargo at Port Nelson? There were records stating they arrived back in Scandinavia in 1364, but no record of their leaving Scandinavia to sail to the New World. Her head was spinning as she exited the building. She thought she must be hungry, low on sugar or something. She drove downtown, and even though she had a large breakfast an hour ago, she sat down in Ma's restaurant and had a 4-piece chicken dinner with dumplings and a chef's salad. She belched several times, as did others in the restaurant. She paid the bill, $2, and drove back to the Lakes Motor Hotel. As she drove in, she noticed a nice black Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner with a retractable hardtop parked in front of a room marked 13. Misty always noticed things and saw it had a Kansas license plate. Could it be? She didn't think so. The last she knew, James had her car, the triple white Star Chief, and that car would have Virginia plates. She vowed to check it out later. Now she needed a nap and went to her room, stripped, wrapped herself in the bed comforter, and went off into dreamland, filled with Las Vegas casino buffets. Across the street, the church parishioner watched her movements, then went back to his business at the Standard Station. Picked up the phone to give the local priest a report. James awoke with a start. Someone was banging on his door. He sat up and nearly passed out from the sudden throb in his head. The knocking continued, and he finally got up and howled to the door. He left the chain on and peered out. A man in a top hat and dark shirt and trousers stood there peering in. "Sir, I would like to know how long you plan to stay at the Lakes." "I don't. Maybe another day," James said. "Well, if you don't mind, the motor hotel will require payment," the man said. "I paid when I came in last night," James said. "What time is it? I'll come down later and pay for another night." "Sir, it's 11:30 in the morning. You've been here 2 nights. This will be the start of your 3rd day. Checkout time was at 11. James' head spun. Then he said, "I'm terribly sorry. I've been a little under the weather. I plan on leaving in the morning. How much do I owe?" "20 a day," the man said sternly. "60 all told." James went back, got his wallet. "Here's 40 and another 5. Could you send a breakfast to my room?" "Breakfast was over James handed him another $2 bill. "Certainly, sir. Please stop by the front desk sometime assigned to the 2 more days." "Thanks," James said, shutting the door. He sat back on the bed and realized he was starved. Soon the breakfast was delivered. The food seemed to help his headache. "I slept 36 hours straight," he said to himself. "Must have needed it." He stretched his sore muscles. He shaved, showered, and then began to look through his papers. After about a half hour, he began to realize James, must be on some kind of mission or search or something. He couldn't remember what, but to go all this trouble and come this far. He had found the map of Oak Island, Nova Scotia, in his bag. It must be of great importance. He then looked over at a brochure of Alexandria on the desk. On the front was a picture of the Kensington runestone. He read the translation and then saw the exact same translation in his notes. He then read his notes from Havner in the Newport Tower. He sat and stared at the Kensington picture for a long, long time. Eventually he dozed off for a half hour, but when he awoke, he decided he'd better go over and see that stone in person. For some reason, he decided he'd better wait until after dark. He felt an unease, and after thinking it through, realized that if this was indeed an important mission, he probably was being followed. More analysis by him also figured out that he might be in danger, but then it crossed his scrambled mind that until he found whatever he was searching for, he would not likely be detained or harmed. He went over and peered out the window. He saw his Fairlane and a couple of women standing by it talking. He also saw a man across the street standing by his car smoking a Camel cigarette. He let the curtain close. He decided he'd better work out his plan, eat in the room tonight, and then go see the stone. As he sat back on the bed, he noticed the 2 stones in his bag, the one with the OS and the one with the L rune on them. He cradled one in each hand, then put them together. To his surprise, they fit together at one end perfectly, seamlessly. They must have been carved together, then they broke apart or were broken into. He spread his maps out on the bed and dug in. He viewed his calculations. 2 of the Newport Tower openings lined up, pointing to Alexandria, Minnesota. Newport Tower, 41.48 north, 71.30 west. Alexandria, Minnesota, 45.53 north, 95.22 west. Distance, 1,236 miles. He found his ruler and drew a line from Newport, Rhode Island to Alexandria, Minnesota. The ruler was 2 feet long, and he extended the line west all the way to the Pacific. He then taped the map up to the wall and stared at it. "What can I be hunting for? Enough to almost die for." He finally dozed off. He didn't awake until about 8. Called for and soon got a supper brought to his room. Cost him another $5 bill, but money did not seem to be an object for him, so far as he could see. His wallet was stuffed with cash. He ate more slowly, staring up at his map. The sun wouldn't set for another hour.